I'd like to call the DuPont City Council meeting to order for September 11th, 2012 at 7:09 p.m. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Coffey?
Here.
Councilmember Quartz?
Here.
Councilmember Ehrenreich?
Present.
Councilmember Jordan? Here. Councilmember Trotter?
Here.
Councilmember Westman?
Here.
Councilmember Wilcox?
Here.
Police Chief Ron Goodpaster?
Here.
Finance Director Sandy Hines? Here. Fire Chief Greg Hull?
Here.
Planning Manager Bill Kingman?
Here.
City Administrator Don Masco?
Here.
Public Works Director Peter Zahn?
Here.
And City Attorney Bob Sturbank.
Here.
Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and continue standing after the pledge for a moment of silence for the victims of 9/11. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're honored tonight to have with us Colonel Hodges. He's a neighbor. He's a resident. He's a leader across the street. And before I call you up, Colonel, I just want to say to everyone that was affected by 9/11. I don't know what your stories are, what your impacts are, but I was surprised today that across the nation, some communities made a big deal of it. Some communities didn't. Some newspapers covered it. Some newspapers, surprisingly, New York Times did not. It's a big deal to us here, and our partnership with Joint Base Lewis McChord and our soldiers that fight for our freedom and their families, it's a relationship that's valued and that's treasured here. And so I wanted to recognize and appreciate the staff that made that September 11th recognition possible today, that sounded out the chimes at Clock Tower Park for every significant moment that happened on 9/11. And Colonel, as we welcome you, just want you to know that you're being welcomed into a family here in this community, and we really look forward to the partnership that we're going to bring with you. Colonel Hodges is a great asset. As I said, he's a neighbor, he's a resident, he lives here. We have a lot of common bonds in him. He's an avid kayaker, like Councilmember Quartz. He loves the Ultimate Fighting Championships, like Councilmember Westman, former contender. I don't actually know that, but it may be true. He is tall and brawny. He loves his family, as all of us do, and he really wants the best for our community and for the community across the street, which he's the commander of. So, Colonel, would you just come forward and tell us a little bit about yourself? And
yeah, actually, first of all, I want to say thank you all very much for having me here this evening. If you don't mind to my back.
No.
Thank you for inviting me out tonight.
Colonel, can you all hear? Because we have sound issues, and you may need to speak into the mic. Can everyone hear back there? Is that all right?
I can sound all pretty well.
Okay.
All right. And again, thank you all very much for having me. As the mayor said, I've been in DuPont for 5 years now, and just recently was assigned over to Joint Base Lewis McChord as the new Joint Base Commander. And I was just telling the mayor, we have great partnerships out there with many, many communities, but none, in my opinion, should be stronger than the one that we have with DuPont. It's our most natural relationship in terms of not only geography, but also in terms of the population. When you consider, I think the last numbers were around 40% of the DuPont population are service members that are either serving at McChord Field or at Lewis Main or Lewis North. So again, thank you all very much for having me out. I did bring a few fact sheets that I wanted to give you quick, because I know you got a busy agenda tonight, a few updates on JBLM and where we currently stand that have an impact on the residents of DuPont. Number one is, if you didn't know this, we are the 12 joint bases. We're the largest of the joint bases out there spread across the country in terms of geographical space, but also closely follow behind Joint Base San Antonio in population. As you all know, as you've experienced, JBLM, formerly Fort Lewis McChord Field, the size of our population on the backside of the page talks about it, we're around 46,000 service members that currently work on Joint Base Lewis McChord. And you consider the growth that we had back in the good old days and back in the 2003 days when it was 18,000, Fort Lewis was sort of Sleepy Hollow and not much going on. Well, that is not the case anymore. And when you add in our family members and our retirees within about a 150-mile radius, you're looking at a city of 155,000, 56,000 that JBLM currently has, which makes us the 6th or 7th, depending on who you argue with, the 6th or 7th largest city in the state of Washington. So a significant impact. A couple things that have changed for all my longtime residents. Just recently, we added the 7th Infantry Division headquarters came on to JBLM. In the past, we've had a 3-star general and a deputy commanding general, but we added a new 2-star general along with 2 1-star generals. So for you all, not much of an impact. For me, huge impact, because now I got 3 more generals that think they're my boss. Okay, so I have a lot more input into my day-to-day activities on trying to run Joint Base Lewis McChord. But what that has done for us, unlike all the other Army installations of equal size, Fort Hood and Fort Bragg, where they've always had a division commander, we never did. And so in terms of command and control, that headquarters was added on there to allow a little more command and control over the units. So we have 7th ID. Another impact, which you'll see on the sheet, I think we got enough for everybody too, I believe, to pass them around out in the audience. Should have 40 of them, is the number of aircraft. You may have heard and seen aircraft flying around. It has less of an impact here in DuPont, but your sister cities down in Lacey and Yelm and Roy are very, very much have received the impact of the increase in aircraft. You know, you got Councilman Courts up here who can give you all the details on aircraft coming here. I blame him for their being here. But the bottom line is a significant number in the 158 range that we now have. And what does that mean for you all? That means the number of aircraft flying over your homes and along routes has increased. And we're doing right now is sort of trying some mitigating factors to try to raise the altitudes up to do that. But you're going to hear and see a lot more helicopters flying around the area as a result of the stationing of the 16th Combat Aviation Brigade onto the installation. Also, on the couple things on the back side or on the front side, if you see, it's a lot of new faces on there. Not only did I join the team here in August, coming back to JBLM from the War College, but my Command Sergeant Major Ron Johnson joined as well. And then my 2 Air Force counterparts, my Deputy Commander, Colonel Val Hasbury, and Chief D. Lewis, also are on the team. So we're a relatively new team, along with, as you all know by now, that General Brown, who is now the new Corps Commander, he joined as well. Both General Brown and myself, not our first time here at JBLM, but have joined the team as well. So a lot of new faces, a lot of new folks on the installation, and a lot of changes going on in terms of growth and the amounts going on. As you probably already know, currently right now, 2 of our major brigades, 2-2 Striker Brigade Combat Team and 3-2 Striker Brigade Combat Team are still out of the loop. They're both in Afghanistan right now, along with the 42nd MP Brigade. So a big chunk of our population is in Afghanistan right now, serving their country, and they'll be coming back here within the next 3 months for the 42nd and 3-2, and the next 8 months for 2-2. So we'll have a bigger, the population is going to increase, which obviously means, you know, more folks running around the city, hopefully spending a lot more money in the downtown area as we go through it all, but the increase will come back in there. We will lose 1 brigade. 4-2 will transition out with 3-2, and they will go to Afghanistan for a 9-month rotation. But after that, the current plan is that we'll have everyone back here basically the end of next summer into next fall. We'll have what we call a full house, meaning everyone's here, and the impacts that has on us in terms of training, but also the impacts it has on the local community in terms of traffic and in terms of the economic impact. And that's the last thing I put on there. Every time when I hear, not so much from here, but I hear folks complaining about I-5, and by gosh, those JBLM guys have caused traffic on I-5, I say, A, have you ever driven it on a Sunday when no one's leaving JBLM and it's still crowded? And I say, B, you know, look at the $6 billion economic impact that JBLM has on the local community as an argument. So I don't want to take any more time. I do, again, appreciate very much the opportunity to come out and talk with you all. I am a neighbor, and I look forward to strengthening the relationship we already have with the city of DuPont and its residents. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Colonel. Next up on the docket, we have 2 presentations, and I'm going to flip it around. Pete, I'm going to ask you to come up first and provide an update on the Sequatchie Creek, Edmonds Marsh, and then I'll go into the mid-year report.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. I'm Pete Stoltz from Cal Portland. We recently had a core group meeting of the Sequatchie Creek restoration planning process on September 6th. Staff with SPSSEG submitted
Puget Sound Salmon Enhancement.
South Puget Sound Salmon Enhancement Group submitted a proposed plan, basically as a discussion item. We discussed options for raising water levels in the lake in Fort Lewis, removal of fill from Edmund Marsh, beaver management options, and potential ways to adjust the flow of water through Hamer and Bell marshes to bring more water to Sequatchie Creek. That process is continuing to go on. We've gotten really positive input from members of the community, Sequatchie Creek Council, JBLM, Pierce County, Nisqually Tribe. Very good participation from everyone, and we're looking forward to that process continuing. Next meeting should occur in about mid-October, yet to be scheduled.
Thanks, Pete. Any questions from council? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. So the next thing on the docket for our presentations tonight is a mid-year report. When I first came into office, as some of you who know me, I'm a very priorities-focused, very result-oriented person. And when I came into office, we set some priorities. We had some events. We had some unplanned events that we had to audible and react to. And we had a lot of volunteers that helped us out along the way. And so tonight, for this report, I wanted to update you on the 3 priorities that I set when I first came into office, report a little bit on the progress, the status, the actions, the next steps, highlight some of those community events. Like I said, some of the many community events that we had planned and some of those that are unplanned, and then talk about the volunteers. The first priority when I came into office, priority number 1, was providing financial stability for our community. And can we just go ahead and, yeah, I hate it when they all kind of pop in. There we go. So what this is I'm not going to speak from the PowerPoint slide because that annoys me when people do that, but this will give you a high points of what I'm going to talk about and touch on. I'll expand in a little more detail. And if anyone wants copies of this PowerPoint, we can print it out for you. You can take it home or download it from the website. But as I said, priority number 1 was providing financial stability. When I first came into office, it was very clear that we had a revenue problem. This is something that we discussed in December when we adopted the budget when I was on council, and it was something that we needed immediate action to address moving forward, and that's why it was my number 1 priority as the mayor. The solutions were very simple for me, and it involved all of us coming together. The answers, that's complex, but we needed to come together as a community, focus on what's most important, figure out what our priorities are, and figure out some innovative solutions to address our revenue problems. And one of the first things I did was a situational analysis. I looked at where we've been as a community and some of the cuts that have been making. What was the immediate action that I could take? And as I looked at the historical reduction list, I'm not going to bore you with the details because I've done that before at meetings, and we've talked about the cuts that have been made. But at a very high level, I mean, over time, positions have been laid off. Positions have been left vacant. We have lost the development director, building inspector, planners, permit technicians, emergency services coordinators. The list goes on. We've revised, renegotiated, and revisited contracts. Some of those contracts have resulted in significant savings, even amounts of $250,000 with some of our courts costs. And by renegotiating some of these contracts, we have realized cost savings. We've reduced printing citywide. We've gone towards email notifications instead of letters and electronic council packets. We've reduced the level of service for parks and greenway maintenance, including a 50% reduction in irrigation. The delayed replacement of equipment and vehicles is also something that has been taken prior to me coming to office. When I came in, I realized that we needed to do more. I took action immediately to convene the community to come together as one. And I asked for volunteers, residents, and business leaders to help us solve our revenue problem, to look at what's been done, look at some of the issues, look at some of the challenges, look at the opportunities, and recommend options that were sustainable to help keep us moving forward as a community. They did that. and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But in addition to the recommendations, while those options were being vetted by the community, we looked at the cost of living adjustments for city staff. Something that you may not know was there's been a high turnover of staff over the years as DuPont's grown from 300 homes to the more than 3,000 that exist now. I mean, we've gone from a community of several hundred people to a community of 8,500 people right now. There's been significant growth. And as that growth has occurred, unfortunately, there's been a lot of turnover in staff. There hasn't been stability in City Hall. And so one of the policies and procedures that was put in place was we would incentivize employees for staying a long time. It's called longevity pay. And there were automatic pay increases. Well, we can't afford those anymore. And we need to be very fortunate and realize we have a stable employment workforce. We have a stable staff. We need to cherish that. We need to set priorities. We need to make sure that we're focusing their efforts and make sure that they're effective and efficient. But we can't keep affording those automatic pay increases. And so I put a freeze on those, and we're going to reform our personnel policies and procedures. Those policies and procedures were the right thing for that time, but it's not something that we can afford and keep doing now. So we need to look at different options. Meanwhile, while we put a freeze on that, there's no cost of living adjustments. And in addition to that, all exempt staff their salaries were reduced by 3%. And as a state employee myself, I took the exact same approach that was done in the state of Washington into our city and reduced exempt staff salaries by 3%. I also called, as I talked about earlier with the Community Finance Committee, I called on the community for your help. I asked you to volunteer. I asked you to roll up your sleeves and help us think our way through it, some of the problems and the challenges that we have. And I'm very impressed at the number of Community Finance Committee members that have gone on to not only serve in that capacity, but to go forward and to serve on the tree board and the planning agency and have continued to stay involved. I really appreciate it. To highlight the initial call to action of that Community Finance Committee, I want to put in context how much work these folks did. Your neighbors put into helping solve our problem. They came together, and there were 10 citizens, all of which volunteered, and business community members, plus 2 council members. I asked for volunteers at the council, and we had 2 step forward and designated 2 staff. And they met 10 times from March till May. All the meetings were open to the public. And they met for 2 hours, and they also had a town hall meeting. And in that time, they looked under every rock. They looked at every viable option. They even looked at some options that may appear viable, but ended up not being the case. I spent a lot of time, personally and professionally, for some of those options that were explored, looking at what was viable. The Finance Committee, they looked at everything that was little and may seem insignificant, from shutting off streetlights to not replacing bulbs, to doubling our B&O tax, increasing our license tax, increasing other fees. They looked at litigation. They talked about bankruptcy. What would it take just to walk away from our obligations? They looked at a plethora of options, and in the end, they landed on a few that they recommended to the community at a town hall meeting. And I listened to the feedback from the committee. I listened to the feedback from the public at that town hall meeting, and then I proposed a path forward to the council. And that path forward was simply this, that we take a equitable, sustainable approach that is temporary to get us through these tough times. And it was a property tax that I proposed. At the time of my proposal, it was for 6 years. And the timing of the 6 years is significant because, first of all, we don't have any other options. One of the options that the Community Finance Committee considered was refinancing. Well, it's not like refinancing your house. It's not that simple. They looked at restructuring. It's not that simple either. But the bottom line is that we can restructure, we can refinance in 2019. So the temporary property tax is important because it bridges the gap from now till when other options may be available. At the same time, to put in and propose a permanent property tax, I don't think that's responsible because we can invest in our economy and we can do things to strengthen the communities, the businesses that are here in our community, and attract new businesses to our community, grow our economy, and diversify our revenue streams. We can't do that overnight. We need time. And so to take the time to invest in our economy, to take the time when other options would be available in 2019, as I mentioned earlier, we needed a temporary solution. And considering that residents and businesses all pay property tax, that was the most equitable and across-the-board solution that was also comprehensive. It wasn't taking a bite-size approach with a whole bunch of other options that were vetted and hoping that none of those fell through the cracks. This was comprehensive, it was equitable, it's sustainable, and it's temporary. So that was my proposal. The council, it was then their turn. They listened to the public, they listened to my recommendation and path forward, and they had some concerns that 6 years was, I think as Councilmember Court said, you're pushing it right up to the razor's edge. What if the interest rates aren't good in 2019? What if there's some other variables? And the council said, we're going to propose a temporary property tax, but for 7 years and not for 6 years. And they adopted that to allow cushion for the city to refinance their debt and have a little more options, a little more wiggle room, if you will, when those options become available in 2019. In an effort to make sure that we have a process that's as transparent and collaborative as possible, we're having another town hall meeting. I know many of you have attended some of these finance meetings, many of you have attended the city council meetings, many of you are here tonight, but we need to improve communications in the community. We need to improve connectivity. We need to come together as one. And for those of you that missed all of those meetings and maybe have not downloaded and read every document on the website, it's a riveting read if you need some good nighttime reading. But all the financial documents are on the website. We posted it on Facebook and Twitter and had many discussions. But we're having another town hall meeting as an opportunity for the city to come together and listen to the council's rationale, understand their thought process, their deliberation, how they listen to the public, how they listen to the options of the finance committee, how they listen to the recommendations in my process, and then how they made their decision as the council is instructed to do as representatives of you. So that's important, and that town hall meeting will happen September 16th at 6 p.m. and I encourage everyone, September 17th at 6 p.m. I may be dyslexic. I'll go see someone about that. September 17th at 6 p.m. And also for those of you that don't know or aren't watching this tonight or aren't here tonight, it's also posted on Facebook. There's also a public notice that's been that'll be in the Tacoma News Tribune, and we're trying to get as much of the word out as possible to encourage people to attend. So for those of you that are here, for those of you that are watching on TV, tell your neighbors, invite your friends and your neighbors and invite them to come down to that meeting. Ask questions, understand, because this is the #1 priority to me for a reason. It should be all of our #1 priority because the path forward will determine the public services that you receive. It'll determine the quality of our parks and recreation and our public safety programs because cuts have been made. We've looked at all available options, and we're at a really tough point where we have to look at the quality of life, at who we are as a community, and who we want to be as we continue to grow up. So I encourage you to come, I encourage you to listen, I encourage you to ask questions. At the same time, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but the Finance Committee, they looked at our B&O tax, and they look at our licensing tax. And this was something that they examined as a viable option. And I did not go that route of just doubling our licensing fees and doubling our B&O because A, I was concerned about what the impact would be to businesses. At the same time, I think that there's an opportunity there. There's an opportunity to examine the issue, have more detailed conversations with business, see if this would be a tool for strengthening economic development, as I said earlier, diversifying our revenue streams and growing our economy. And I did not pursue that route and instead looked at opportunities to reform. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But one of the things that we did was we audited businesses to make sure that they're paying the right amounts of the B&O tax. Unfortunately, we're very short-staffed, and the staff person that we have that does that work has been ill, and that work's been delayed a little bit. But just auditing and doing the assessments to make sure that the right people are paying the right amounts is important. I had two meetings with the business community, and we got great feedback about B&O reform and licensing reform, and like I said, we'll talk about that later. And the council will continue that conversation about business and occupation tax and licensing tax at their September 18th and September 25th meetings. And they'll do a fiscal analysis of the impacts and the costs and the potential revenue generated, and they'll continue that conversation. But it's important to note that this strengthening our economy is not going to be something that we can do overnight. It's not going to be something that we can do with the wave of a wand or the passage of a policy, and these things will take time. And I appreciate the council taking the time to look into what kind of investments that we can make to grow our economy, and also what type of partnerships that we can create to make sure that we make the right economic investments. It's also important to note that as we look at our financial problem, your city council made a decision to decrease our sales tax. Now, there's no benefit to us as the city, but it was a step in the right direction of looking at what return on investment are we getting from our transit services. And we were part of a public transportation benefit area known as the Pierce Transit Boundary. We don't get bus service from Pierce Transit, yet we paid a significant amount that we weren't getting a return on investment for. And I really appreciate Councilmember Aaron Wright's work, who really spearheaded this for the council. He attended a lot of meetings, and he looked at the impacts. He talked with a lot of businesses, and we made the decision to pull out of that benefit district, which is a direct benefit for the citizens of our community and for our businesses, because people will pay less sales tax. I don't know how many people actually ran out and spent more money because of that, but you know, it makes a difference to your pocketbook. It helps our businesses, and it's something that we can make sure that we're doing to make sure we have a return on our investment. The other thing that we're doing about our finances is performance management. And for anyone that knows about basic performance management, you have to set goals, you have to have clear actions, and then you have to monitor the progress, see how you're doing in achieving those goals. Outside of that, there's no way that you can actually ensure that you're being effective and efficient with your dollars and with your time and with your energy. So we've partnered with the state auditor's office. We brought them in, and I've asked them to come and review all of our performance measures, give us recommendations on improving performance measures where we may have gaps or where we may be lacking, and point us in the right direction. Tell us the performance measures that we have that are good so we can keep replicating those. It'll help us continue to focus on results to increase trust and transparency and effectiveness. These are some of the many things that we're doing to make sure that we're dealing with the #1 priority, which is providing financial stability for our community. So I encourage you to turn out to the town hall meeting and look forward to many questions and conversations that you have with your neighbors, with me, with the council. Really seek to understand this issue, the nuances, and the implications, because the answer is in your hands, and it's a critical juncture for our community. The second priority is about our sign code. And when I was on the planning agency, this was the hot topic. We had many council members come, we had many businesses come, many residents come, and say our sign code is not effective. It's not efficient, and it's not enforceable. And there were people complaints saying that, look, the wrong signs are all over the place that are not consistent with our code, and the city isn't doing anything about it. And there was many debate, there was many deliberation, there was many versions of the sign code, but this continued to be the #1 issue for the business community, was having a sign code that was effective and enforceable. And so what we did is set this as a priority and made sure that Bill Kingman, that this was at the top of his to-do list, was to work with our faith-based communities, to work with the public, to work with the planning agency, and to work with the business community, and have a sign code that actually addresses temporary signs and is enforceable. And one of the things that is important for you to know is there's been 11 public meetings that have occurred on this topic. 9 of them have occurred this year. And the reason I say that is because you can't do this stuff overnight. You can't just flip a switch. If we're serious about coming together as a community and looking at things from all angles, you know, there were things on Bill's to-do list that did not get done because this was a priority and this was a concern for business that needed a solution. So some things that are on Bill's to-do list didn't get done, and Bill made this a top priority, as did many members of this community and the planning agency. And I appreciate them coming together to have a focused conversation to meet the needs of the many interested parties in this community because, I mean, let's be honest, we don't want signs that are cluttering up our community. We love DuPont. We like it looking beautiful. We like that consistent look. At the same time, we have to have a sign code that allows our businesses to advertise, whether they be brick and mortar, whether they be internet, whether they be on a right-of-way or not on a right-of-way, or whether they be a home-based business. So we need to take that into account because supporting our businesses, even in little ways of signage, not only helps with economic development, but it helps preserve the beauty and the quality of life that many of us love here in the city of DuPont. Recently, we had a public hearing on this topic on September 10th. There was another one on September 24th, and the next steps include the planning agency continue to vet and look at options. I got an email the other day, and someone said, hey, I like the fact that you guys are doing this sign code, and I think you're moving in the right direction, and we appreciate you making it a priority. But the importance of making it enforceable was emphasized in this email, and I called this gentleman today. I appreciate those emails and those calls, and we talked through it, and I shared with him a proposal that's out there. One of the concerns that businesses had is they said, we want it to be cheap. Everybody wants it to be cheap, right? But you only get what you pay for. So they wanted it to be cheap and affordable, but at the same time, they wanted it to be enforceable. Well, I can tell you, we're one deep in City Hall in many of these functions, and going out and enforcing the sign code, it's a problem, and it doesn't flow to the top of the priority list. But the sign code has to be enforceable, and we have to enforce it. And so we're looking at some innovative public-private partnerships with the DBA, with the COA, with the ROA, and for those of you who hate acronyms as much as I do, that's the DuPont Business Association, the Commercial Owners Association, and the Residential Owners Association. And looking at ways that we can help educate the public and educate businesses and educate the commercial owners about our sign code, give them a warning, and if there is no compliance with the sign code, I'm very comfortable, and council, we can talk about this later, having a ridiculously high penalty that'll send a message as a deterrent for anyone that violates it. But there's no way that we can have a cheap sign code without the resources to enforce it, without some creative public-private partnerships. So again, I'm going to ask for help from those organizations and from all of us to not only draft this sign code and complete it this year in a way that is effective and is enforceable, but beyond that, we're going to actually make sure that there's partnerships out there to educate the public and hold the businesses and the commercial owners and the residents accountable for their actions, making sure that they know that there's a sign code and what it entails. And we'll create one that is strengthening our business and our economy. The third priority is about healthy trees and safe sidewalks. And some of you may be going, what the heck is the issue? And then I know there's some people in the 1, 2, 3, third row that are saying, thank God you're dealing with this. The healthy trees, safe sidewalks is important for many reasons. I mean, we all like to breathe, right? Everybody likes to breathe, and we all know about trees and the nexus to oxygen and how helpful that is. And trees are pretty. They help create some of the habitat that we love that Pete was up here talking about. We're trying to preserve and make sure that the creek and the water and the salmon flow, and DuPont is a beautiful place to live that's vibrant economically and naturally. But our problem is simply this. We had the wrong trees planted in the wrong places. And as much as that may seem simple, I've got emails and had conversations at all hours of the day and morning that, you know, we'll just take a chainsaw to them and chop them down. That's a solution. We could replace them individually, and we could have streets lined with piecemealed different varieties of trees. Not really kind of the vision when we started it, but that could be an option. We could have no trees. We could enforce the current code, which is a little ambiguous, and say, this is up to you, homeowners, to figure out on your own. Good luck, God bless. Or the city could take some ownership of this problem, and we could look at and come up with a comprehensive strategy to replace these trees or fix the issue of having the wrong trees planted in the wrong places. To answer that question takes time. And again, I appreciate Councilmember Ehrenreich for coming together. When we were council members, we were talking about the importance of trees and Arbor Day. And John really led the way for us to becoming a Tree City USA contingent, which allows us to get technical resources and expertise to help solve our problems, as well as it gives us recognition for being one of the unique cities that actually has a beautiful tree canopy and the many benefits that we talked about before. So that tree board has been working to solve this problem. And the reason it's a priority is simply this. We have to start looking long-term at where we want to be. And although some of the trees and some of the aphids and some of the sidewalks buckling, those are nuisances now. They're inconveniences. They're also liabilities. And if we don't start fixing them now, the costs will only increase. The nuisances will only increase. The damage to the infrastructure will only increase. So we need to be proactive and solve this problem now. And there's a series of steps that we've been taking through this tree board to proactively address this problem of having the wrong trees planted in the wrong places. At the same time, we can't ignore our responsibility and legal implications, and we need to reduce the liability as well. One of the things that the tree board has done is they've produced a tree care manual. And what that is it's a guidance. We got grant funding to do this, so that while we're figuring out this problem, some of you have applied it and it works. Some of you applied it and not had the best luck. But the bottom line is it's a comprehensive manual that says, here's how to take care of your trees. Here's the benefits, here's the things to consider, and whether you're looking at basic tree biology, whether you're looking at tree selection, whether you're looking at planting locations, whether it's the tree in front of your house or in front of your yard, here's some tools that you can use. And we appreciate the grant and the funding that was secured at no cost to the city to produce this manual. And not only is it going to be a long-term resource, but it's a short-term stopgap to empower residents to have the resources to help address this problem as they see fit and consistent with existing codes as we solve the larger issue. The second thing that we're doing is, and this all comes back to public-private partnerships again, not only the collaboration of the tree board members, but with state agencies. We're doing a public street tree inventory, and we're doing this through a partnership with the Department of Natural Resources that has a community forestry program. And we secured a grant, and we partnered with DNR to basically figure out the scope of this problem. As I said, there's many different ways to solve it, but in order to understand what the solution is, you have to fully understand the problem. And so we're looking at the scope of the issue, how many trees, how many locations, collecting data. And again, all of this is being done at no cost to the city, but it takes time. They're focusing on this right now, and they're going to have some great results by the end of the year, because they're starting with a tree pilot project in Palisade Village. And then this pilot project will expand to the rest of the city so we can understand the full scope of the project. Meanwhile, as we're looking at how to fix this in a specific area of the community in Palisade Village, I talked about our liability, and it's up there. We are grinding sidewalks. And there is a provision that says we could go out and we could charge all of you to grind the sidewalks in front of your house. The city has made a decision that we will be providing the resources for grinding some of those sidewalks, because it's a hazard, it's a liability issue, not only for the homeowners, but also for the city. And so that was a decision that was made. It's a decision that is being stuck to as we figure out this problem and figure out how to move forward together. The The last thing that I really want to emphasize is again, appreciation for the tree board, for the Department of Natural Resources, for their community forestry program, and for the citizens that continue to partner with us to provide solutions to deal with some of those annoying or significant problems that may not be significant to the whole community, but when you talk to people in a certain neighborhood, some of the nuisances and some of the byproducts of having the wrong tree planted in the wrong place, it matters to them. And there's several of them that are looking together to find some solutions to dealing with some of those nuisance issues, and the city will continue to support them in any way possible. Priority number 4 is really just recognizing, I just misspoke. We had 3 priorities. The 4th thing I want to point to is the community events. And this is really significant because DuPont has a very significant history and we have a vibrant future. And as I talked about earlier, one of the things that makes us great is our ability to come together. And God, Larry, I really want to make a comment about that picture on the top right, but I'm not going to. You look great.
How attractive that was.
Oh, wait, that's not Larry in the makeup. He's a couple of things that I really want to point out is these 4 events up here. We have tons of events, and all of them are significant. But these one deserve special attention and recognition. And the reason is this. National Night Out is something that several neighborhoods got together and they celebrate every year. In fact, it was so important one year that council members were saying they needed to leave early so they could go home and be part of their neighborhood National Night Out. And so this year we said, okay, we're going to make sure that we're not scheduling a council meeting on National Night Out, and we're going to encourage our whole city to participate in those events. And we were lucky because just calendar of events, there was actually no conflict. We didn't need to do any rescheduling. But we all celebrated National Night Out as a community, and the focus of this is partnering to talk about public safety issues. And what are some of the opportunities that we have to come together as a community to address public safety, to raise awareness, and really understand the nuances of not only our public safety programs, but what we can do in our own neighborhoods, community watch programs, etc. And as I talked about earlier with the financial aspects, there's not much room to cut. If we don't approve a property tax, cuts will have to be made, and some of those cuts are going to have to come out of public safety. They're going to have to come out of Parks and Recreation. And instead of turning a blind eye to the implications, we figured, let's really make sure that we promote public safety and public safety awareness. So no matter what the citizens decide, that they're empowered with information. And so we offer a lot of public safety services and public safety programs. And some of those are CPR, some of those are CERT, Community Emergency Response Trainings. And all of those were talked about during the National Night Out to help raise awareness of what people can do to take responsibility for supporting their neighbors and supporting their families to help raise awareness. And so I just really want to appreciate all of the firefighters that went around to each of those events and talked about public safety. I know that we had an event in our community, and the kids that all wore the bicycle, that all had bicycle helmets on, each of them got a sticker and they got tattoos. And my daughter's still talking about the firefighters and the police officers, and it was a great event. And just really appreciate all the outreach that you do, all the education and all the training, both of you, Chief, on the police side and the fire side. The second thing is Arbor Day. And as we talked about earlier, we have a tree board, and trees are important. But the tree planting is something that we do every year. It's a requirement to be a Tree City USA, so it's a have to. But it's also a want to. It's something that's really important, and it's so important. We had a whole school full of third graders come out and participate. We had our senator come and represent, our city administrator, former city administrator at the time, now the former president of the Lions Club, and many other leaders came out to plant the tree. And I just want to note, and John can talk about the details of this, but our tree board is so smart and so savvy. Instead of actually planting it on Arbor Day, we actually do a ceremony on Arbor Day, and we also do another tree planting that occurs in the fall, which is actually the better time to be planting trees. And so really appreciate the expertise and the wisdom of the people that come and help us celebrate Arbor Day, and are also helping solve our street tree problem. The July 4th celebration, some of you may be wondering, why is that worthy of mention? It's something we do every year. This year was awesome. Some people even said this was the best ever. It's an ROA event that's primarily funded by Northwest Landing, our Residential Owners Association. And we have several volunteers that come together, and they have an awesome parade. They have great booths, great fairs, great family activities, wonderful events. But this year was unique. Not only did I think we have the best musician ever, we had this amazing jazz player from Vegas, I think, come in, who played phenomenal music at the park. But we had a fireworks celebration. It was the first year we actually had a full-on annual fireworks celebration, and hope to make it an annual event. And that was paid for and sponsored by Patriots Landing. And it was no small feat to pull that off, but our police officers and our firefighters and our businesses and the ROA and the volunteers, they made it a full-on, incredible day of celebrating Independence Day here in DuPont. I want to make sure that all of the partners are recognized. And because of this recognition, it's important to appreciate them, because our city got an award. We were awarded by the Association of Washington Cities for having a community spirit that is unsurpassed, that's better than any other state, that's better than any other city in the state. And it was because of our 4th of July celebration. And just to give a special thanks to a couple of folks, the Northwest Landing ROA, they provided $15,000 of sponsorship for this event. The Historical Society and Forever Young Seniors, they cooked at the pancake breakfast, provided amazing food for all of us to have. Cal Portland provided a $3,000 sponsorship of the event. Patriots Landing, as I said earlier, they put on that fireworks display. I don't know how much that cost, but it must have been expensive. The DuPont Lions, I don't know what that means. Red, white, and blue ally? They did the concessions. So I have up here as a reminder to myself to say red, white, and blue alley, and I don't know what that means. But now I do. It's the line of concessions at the 4th of July parade. The next event that I want to touch on briefly is the Hudson Bay Heritage Days. This is an event that's sponsored by our tourism committee, and it celebrates our history and our historical society. Sorry, tourism plays a part in that, don't they? Yeah, tourism and our historical society, and it's the one day of the year that this site is open to the public, and it's a historical significant site. It's one of many that we have in this community that, candidly, I take for granted every time I drive down Center Drive and walk through our parks and trails. Our city is so rich in its history, and it's a great asset, and this is one of the many ways that we have to come not only access this particular site, but come together to dress up in costumes and eat great food and salmon and talk about the significance that our history has to offer. The uniqueness of this day was a little bit different beyond just the normal celebration. We had a golf tournament. It was the first golf tournament that we had, where the home course offered a discount rate, and we had a city golf tournament. We had a movie in the park night that the ROA sponsored, and then we had the Fort Nisqually event that the Historical Society spearhead. So thanks to all the many partners that came together, and the proceeds of this event went to fund our Historical Society, which is an important aspect to supporting tourism and supporting economic development. History is not our only economic driver, but it's an important resource that we have that we need to showcase in our community and that we need to invest in to preserve and tell the story. The last slide is about volunteers. And as many of you know, I like to give credit where credit's due. And we've had several proclamations this year honoring student athletes that have made significant contributions representing our high school, our community, have accomplished significant academic and athletic achievements. And we've recognized little individuals like Bam, who's a 10-year-old who tied so many balloons. He's a balloon artist. He tied so many balloons at an event for Wear Blue Run to Remember that his fingers blistered. And as his dad said, bam, just call it a day. Like, we're good. And he said, Dad, there's still kids left that don't yet have a balloon. This kid's 10. It was incredible. And we've honored people like that. And it's important to do. And I really want to just broadly thank so many of the community members who volunteer their time and their energy coaching, organizing, cleaning up our community, and making events the success that they are across all of our programs, all of our events. And one of the things that really want to talk about, as I mentioned earlier, is the community emergency response team and the CPR training. This is something that we've done for a while. We're going to continue to promote this and make it available, but it's critical. For those of you who don't know or look at it in the larger context too often, DuPont is really an island. I mean, we've got I-5 and Joint Base Lewis-McChord. We've got the Nisqually and we've got Steilacoom and Fort Lewis. If something happens in our community, there's tons of great partners and neighbors within the region that'll come help us, but they're not going to get there for a while, and we need to be diligent in our preparedness, and that first and foremost starts in every one of our homes and in our families and in our streets and our neighborhoods, and then as our community. And the community emergency response team is a service that we offer where residents can come together and get the training and get equipped with emergency supplies so that they're prepared to not only help their family, but to help their neighbor and help the community in a situation that requires emergency and disaster services. So it's something we really want to spotlight. We've had 17 citizens who've been registered for the class. We've graduated 28 new CERT members, and I encourage all of you to pay attention to this and consider signing up. The next class is beginning on October 16th, and information is available on our website. The second thing is CPR training. I can't tell you how important enough this is. I was a lifeguard in high school and college, and I thought, I know CPR. I got this. I recently went through and did a CPR training with some of our firefighters. The rules have changed. You don't even do breaths anymore. They say, if you are the first responder, you just do chest compressions. I didn't know that. I don't know how many of you know that, but that was news to me. And the significance of arriving on a scene and providing those chest compressions, it saves lives. It's a basic level of service. And it's a service that all of us should know how to provide, again, to our families and to our neighbors as a matter of first response. So our fire department in that effort has trained and issued 2-year certification cards to over 80 individuals in the past 12 months. This is a huge increase, and we're going to continue to promote this public safety awareness and training, encouraging everyone to do it. Approximately 45 of these individuals were working at business in DuPont, and 40 of them were DuPont citizens. There's an interesting fact here I'll share with you, that brain death begins in 4 to 6 minutes following a heart attack with complete failure. And that's one of the reasons why that circulation and those chest compressions are so important. So get the training, sign up, and become aware of what you can do within your family, within your neighborhood, and within our community to help keep it one of the safest cities in Washington State. In fact, this last year, we were recognized as the safest city in Washington State, and we need to keep that reputation. Some of the other things I want to highlight quickly are our boards, our commissions, and our committees, starting with the call to action from the Community Finance Committee. As I said, we can't do this alone. We have to come together as one community, and I have asked people to lend their time and lend their talents and their energies and their insight to help us solve the problems of the day and the problems of the future. And I just appreciate the many folks that not only served on that Community Finance Committee, but many of the other boards and commissions that we have. And it's something that we're short on staff, we're short on resources, but this isn't a time to complain. That's just a fact. The bottom line is we need to come together and solve our problems, and there are many people that are actually out there being part of the solution, and I appreciate that, and I thank the members that are serving on that committee. One of the other opportunities that we looked at this year was engaging people of all generations, and what we were lacking here in our community was engagement of the youth. We have parks and recreation programs, but actually involving the youth as decision makers listening to the voice of youth and helping them be part of the solution was a huge opportunity. And that was one of the first things that we did as I took office, was we created a youth council. And they've done several things that are worthy of note. They've adopted a family at Easter. They've created the annual springtime egg hunt that they help volunteer and make it even more kid-friendly. It's an event that the ROA puts on. And they had their own National Night Out celebration. And they also went out and had the second annual Teen Talent Show. It was a great opportunity for kids to come together, share their talents, and for family, friends, and neighbors to sit up on that lawn and listen to some very entertaining music and skits and other things that were presented. And so I really appreciate the energy and involvement that the youth have had as they've stepped up. I also want to recognize the DuPont Lions Club. They have done so much. One of the things that we can all see a noticeable difference in is the arbor in Clock Tower Park. They came together. There was a problem that the arbor was failing. It needed to be fixed. And we're not talking a couple of nails and that it needed to be leveled. It needed to be replaced. And they came together and they got the resources and the energy and the time and to fix that problem. And they did it on their own accord and their own ingenuity. And the Lions and the other people that helped the Lions Club do that deserve a lot of credit. And this is just one of many examples of the Lions Club helping serve our community. And if those of you are interested for a service club, I'd encourage you to check it out. The other thing I wanted to touch base on briefly is the incidents that happen that we can't control. These are all things up here where our volunteers came together and they're helping serve, they're helping roll up their sleeves, they're being part of the solution for planned events, things that we can control. Sometimes you can't control events, you can't plan them, but what you can do is come together as a community and respond. And the snow, ice, winter storm that we had this year was the top of the example for me. When we were hit with that situation, we had resources that were limited and needed to be utilized. And we executed a snow plan. We made sure that the roads were cleared so that our public safety personnel could move about the city and respond to emergencies. We made sure that the roads were clear enough for people to get to work. But the key thing in this was after the snow has melted, we had a huge ice storm. And the result of that ice storm, the consequence was several of our trails and our parks being closed. And we went out there and prioritized what trails and parks were important to open, and we asked for help. And there were many neighbors and organizations that came together and said, yeah, we'll help you open up those parks and open up those trails even faster. And there were some individuals that had their own list. One guy said, just give me a trail and I'll go clear it. There were church groups. We had the Church of Latter-day Saints. We had True Green. We had Joint Base Lewis McCord, Blade Masters Lawn Care, Intel, the Commercial Owners Association, Northwest Landing, the DuPont Lions, and many other volunteers that came together, and they essentially adopted parks. They adopted trails. They helped out neighbors. We created a hotline that if you were stuck and you had damage on your lawn or you had damage to your trees or your property, and you weren't of a physical condition to actually take care of it yourself, we created a mechanism for people to call in and get the help that they needed. And all those folks, they responded. And their response did not go unnoticed. We had a volunteer barbecue, recognition barbecue on March 1st to say thank you to our many volunteers. And this goes back to the importance of celebrating our volunteers, asking people for help, encouraging us to come together and solve our problems, and then celebrating and recognizing them when they do. Because we can all sit at home like a lump on a log and just hope that something gets done or send an email or a phone call with a complaint. Or you can get out and be part of the solution. And we need to do that. And I encourage everyone to do more of it. And I appreciate and value all the time and the energy and the contributions that people make when they do engage and reach out to their neighbor and reach out to the needs of our city, because it makes it the great city that we are today. So with that, I will just conclude with a couple of remarks. Every city has their challenges. Every community has their problems. And the important thing to do is to come together, to set priorities, and get the job done. So we can do a few key things. We need to protect the quality of life that we enjoy. We need to keep our city beautiful with our natural areas. We need to attract great companies to provide good jobs and strong economic stability. We need to preserve our history and shout it from the rooftops. We've got an amazing story to tell about our historical assets. We need to preserve and protect and invest in them. We need to maintain public safety services that continue to keep our families safe. And by doing so, we will make sure that DuPont continues to be the best place to live, work, and play, which is what we all want and we're all striving for. So thanks for the report and the update, and I will answer any questions that folks have during the public meeting or offline. I'm also available on Thursdays if folks want to talk about any of the topics that I raised today. At the same time, I also want to flag that we will be having a series of community meetings to talk about these priorities, to talk about these accomplishments, and more importantly, to listen to the ideas and the issues that are important to your family and that are important to your neighborhood, because we've identified priorities for this year. We've made great accomplishments. We'll continue to see results. We're going to continue to identifying priorities and focusing on results, and we'll continue doing so as a community. So I look forward to many conversations with you at council meetings and community meetings, on the phone, in email, or in my office. Call or stop by any time. But the most important thing is that we keep coming together as a community to make DuPont the best place to live, work, and play. So with that, we'll now open up the public hearing, and it's regarding the CenturyLink easement. We've had a briefing on this before, and there's some information, but when Peter Zahn gets up here, I'll have him provide a brief overview and give us some context for this hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A brief background before the public hearing is actually opened. This evening we have a public hearing that's required by RCW 5817.225, and it's regarding a city-owned tract that's was platted as open space. So about a year ago, CenturyLink had approached city staff to let us know that they had some existing telecommunications facilities that didn't have an easement. So the facilities were constructed with one plat development with the intention of being included in easements granted with the next plat development, and that was inadvertently omitted. They identified that late last year, approached the city, and we've been working on that to rectify that. RCW 5817.225 does require a public hearing with notice to the owners in the affected property. Owners in the affected plat. The city did send out 172 notices to owners within the Oaks plat, and this is a public hearing required for that. If the council has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Otherwise, I'd recommend we open the hearing.
Okay. Bob, do you have anything to add to that? Okay. We'll open the public hearing and take public testimony, and then after that, we'll close the public hearing. The public hearing is now open at 8:12 p.m. Is there anyone wishing to comment, provide public testimony? Okay, we will close the public hearing at 8:13. Now we'll go to the approval of the agenda. A motion would be in order. Motion's been made by Councilmember Court, seconded by Councilmember Coffey. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries 7-0. This is the first opportunity for people to come up and address us with public comments. It can be about any issue tonight, anything that's happening in your community, or anything that you see that is a big issue for our city. So feel free to come on up and address any issue to the council.
Ray Cohn, 1852 Johnston Avenue, DuPont. Just a couple of things. First thing was about promoting the city. I've just done 6 shows on Western Washington, Walla Walla and Dayton, and as these shows were 2 hours long, I was able to talk about DuPont. And I asked the audience if anybody had heard of DuPont, and one or two put their hands up. But I told them about the city, and I told them what was available here, Puget Sound and different things, so they know a little bit more about it. The second thing was that, I know it's a bit late now, but while you were talking, I was thinking, have you considered leasing out part of this building as a temporary measure to get some money and squeezing up the offices? Because some people are part-time here and they may have a whole office, which is a waste of space. So you could squeeze people up and get a law firm in here or something. It might bring in 100,000 over that 6-year period.
Be a small law firm.
I don't know, but
Yeah.
I've only been behind there once. I can't remember, but it looks big from the outside. I just wonder.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of vacant offices back there, and Ray, I'll be honest, I haven't thought of that, and I think it's something that's worth exploring. I know there is a constraint of gifting or utilizing public goods and services and assets, and obviously that's a question for our attorney later. But
I know
think it's a good idea.
there are people who are looking for a good deal. So, and in DuPont, the lease rate is $24 to $26 a square foot. You could bring that down to 15 or 16. You'll get somebody.
Yeah, it's a good idea. We'll look into it. Thank you. Additional public comments? Okay. Next up is the approval of the consent agenda items. A motion would be in order. Motion's been made by Councilmember Jordan, seconded by Councilmember Trotter. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries 7-0. Next up is discussion items. There's, what? Oh, we need the vouchers down here. That concludes our discussion items. It was very in-depth. Yeah, any objections? So there's no discussion items, and this brings us to the mayor's report, where you get to listen to me talk again. I'll keep my points a little more brief on this one, but this is important. I want to talk about revenue reform, and it's important to share this with you. A, because I said I would look into this and we would analyze this, both from two aspects. The first is listening to the recommendations of the Finance Committee, and there's nothing that they did, the time that they spent away from their family, the time that they spent reading the abundance of information that we made, and the thoughtful deliberation that they gave to the different options available. There's none of that I take lightly. And I said that I would look into the increase of a B&O tax and the increase of the licensing fee. Not only that they were proposing it as a solution for generating revenue. That's where they were coming from. And there's important context of understanding the nuances of our current tax system that I wanted to look at and explore with the business community and explore with the council. So there's two things that I want to talk about tonight in my mayor's report. The first is revenue reform, and the second is I want to flag some upcoming public meetings for all of you that we'll talk about later. The goal, from my perspective, now that we've looked at B&O tax reform and we've looked at licensing as a potential funding source, and we decided to move into a different direction. We decided that the property tax would be more equitable and it would be more fair, considering, as I said earlier, that businesses and residents both pay that. So in that context, we wanted to look at what revenue opportunities may still exist in the B&O tax and in the licensing, consistent with the way that the Finance Committee proposed it. And at the same time, we wanted to look at reforming it to make sure that it's more equitable, to make sure that it's as effective as possible, and to have two central goals. The first is supporting our existing businesses, and the second is attracting new businesses. And when I first heard of this proposal from the business, or from the Community Finance Committee, I knew that this was an important topic and one that's worthy of a lot of consideration. And I want to back up and give you a little context of how I went about essentially building a partnership with the business community and involving them in my deliberation and my vetting of this issue. When I first came into office, I talked about the importance of economic development, and I had an initial meeting with the business community. And I said, let's talk about the city's strengths and the city's weaknesses. And they gave me a list. And the list is simply this. We have an attractive community. We're a great place to live. We have many developable land. We have great, diverse businesses here. We have easy access to I-5 through several venues. We have proximity to Joint Base Lewis-McChord, which provides not only a consistent revenue stream for certain businesses that we have, but they're also a stable partner, and we know that they will provide investments through services and patronage to different businesses that we can rely on and we can count on. We're a safe city. It's a huge asset to businesses. It's something that they value. We have sweeping views of Puget Sound. We have several trails and parks that people can come and really enjoy the quality of life. These are all things that businesses said, we love DuPont, and this is why we locate here. We also have one of the lowest property tax rates in the county. And, well, they went on, there's a couple other things, but the key thing is the weaknesses. And what they talked about was the permit process and the time frame. They said the permit process is long, and it inhibits our ability to attract new businesses. The number one issue, they said, was the sign code. So we're fixing that, and they were excited to see that that was one of the priorities early on. But the reason I provide this context to you is, as I heard this proposal from the Community Finance Committee to just double the licensing fee, to double the B&O tax, I wanted to see if there were opportunities to reform it, as I said earlier, not only to support and attract new businesses, but see if there was a way to get revenue to address some of these other problems or solve some of our other issues that are important to the business community. And what I did was I asked the business community to come together, and we had 2 meetings. And I'll be honest, I was surprised by the feedback that I received. We went through and we talked about our current tax code for the B&O tax. And then we talked about our current business licensing structure. And we got feedback on this. What were some of the pros and what were some of the cons? And then we talk about new options. And Sandy, I'd just like to hit pause. Can you just walk through some of the nuances of our B&O tax code and our licensing code so that we're all on the same page? You can just hit the high points. I know it's in the handout here.
Sure, I can do that. Our business licensing fee is a flat $50 per year for both regular businesses, and for home occupations it's $20 a year if you have gross revenue less than, I believe, $10,000 per year. But it is just a flat fee for any size of business, and we do process and administer that through the state's master license program. For our B&O tax, the city adopted the model B&O tax ordinance several years ago that many cities have used, and we have multiple classifications listed in our code, including manufacturing, retail, services, extracting, printing and publishing, and such. All classifications of our B&O tax code pay the same rate. So the city's rate is 0.1% of gross receipts, which can be classified either as gross income, gross sales, some measure of depending on your classification of business. But all classifications pay the same rate of the 0.1%. We do have some thresholds so that small businesses are exempt. If a business's gross receipts are less than $5,000 per quarter or less than $20,000 per year, then there's no tax owed. We just require that the businesses submit their reports so that we know where they fall within that. One item I failed to mention on the business license for nonprofits. Nonprofits are exempt from a business license fee with proof of their 501c3 status. So a nonprofit does not have to pay a business license, but they are, however, still subject to the B&O tax, assuming that they have gross receipts generated by their business. There's a few exemptions within the code for B&O tax also that are kind of the various and unique type of situations. Sales of real estate being one that's common, that's exempt from a B&O. And I believe those are the high points.
So with that, I mean, some of the high points that jumped out to the Community Finance Committee, and you guys start waving, kicking, screaming if I don't capture this accurately. But some of the high points that jumped out were, wait, so everybody pays the exact same rate for a licensing fee? Everybody pays the same rate for B&O? It was a little alarming to me that it was just that simple. The Finance Committee was looking at this, as I said, as a solution to earning revenue. We earn $200,000 from our B&O tax every year. So they said, well, let's just double the rate and we'll get $200,000 more. And they took a similar approach to the licensing. What's the revenue for licensing? 70,000?
About 20,000 a year, or sorry, 40,000.
$40,000 a year. And so let's double that, and we'll have 40,000 extra dollars. And that was one of the solutions that they were looking at. I had other folks that came to me and said, why is our B&O and our license fee the exact same? And why are there some businesses that pay it and some businesses that don't? And there's another opportunity to bring in the fold some of those businesses that are not paying the B&O tax, and let's charge them. Let's increase the B&O tax rate from 0 to something and generate that revenue and use that to pay down the debt. And so there were many different options that were thrown out there as a solution for proposing funding. And so we went into these meetings that I had with businesses, and I was expecting to hear that, yes, you should restructure the licensing fee, and you should restructure the B&O tax so that you have different rates. You have a different structure to incentivize some businesses and maybe make other businesses pay a little bit more that may be more fair or more equitable in the perception of some. It's also an incentive to help attract some of the businesses that we're trying to attract down the road and maybe deter some of the businesses that we want to deter from coming in the community. It's a helpful tool on many fronts. And so we looked at options, which are all in your packets, and I won't bore folks with it. But we looked at several options to reform the B&O and to reform the license. And I invited folks to come together from a broad spectrum of businesses. We invited the Pierce County Chamber of Commerce. We invited the Pierce County Economic Development Board. We invited all the businesses here. We invited the Commercial Owners Association. We invited the DuPont Business Owners Association. And we actually had folks that don't do business in the city that were thinking about opening up a business come. And we had folks that wanted to open up a business in the community but looked at some of the pros and cons of our structures and decided against it. So we had very robust conversations. But the takeaway, as I said, was surprising. They basically said having a B&O tax right now is a liability. So to look at investing time to restructure it, as I thought would have been the answer, and a good investment of time and resources and economic stimulus, they said, no, don't waste your time. There was only one person that said lower the B&O tax, and it was for retail sales, and he doesn't even live here or have a business in here. But that was the one person that said to lower the B&O tax to help provide some relief to the small business owners. And some of the other ones said, we're already at a disadvantage of having a B&O tax. Some of the facts are, out of the 281 cities in Washington, there are only 39 that have a B&O tax. And one of the gentlemen that was here said, let's look at some of our comparable cities, those that we're competing against. And they mentioned cities that still had land that were developing or that had very robust economic development strategies and were attracting new development. Renton, Fife, Sumner, Auburn, Kent, and Lakewood, they don't have a B&O tax. And to be honest with you, as I told them, I said, I wish we didn't have one, because to me that would make us more attractive. But we can't afford to lose $200,000 of revenue right now. So I told them that's not an option. We looked and talked through a whole bunch of different reform options. And as I mentioned earlier, they said, don't waste your time. That's not the best use of your time right now. What was alarming to me was, and sad, there's not a plan. There's not an economic development plan. There's not an updated tourism plan. And it was great to be in a room with all of these different business partners that are very invested in our community, that have a stake in the health of our city, because their financial solvency or their financial well-being partially depends on that. But they get together and they talk. The DBA, they talk, and the Commercial Owners Association, they talk, and we have our tourism group, they talk, and the planning agency, they talk, and we have a comprehensive land use plan which guides development. But we haven't come together, all of those groups, and said, let's update our tourism plan. Let's make sure that little asset down the road that has 18 holes and is very attractive for our city is actually in the tourism plan. Let's market our golf course. Let's promote that more and add that to the other historical assets that are here that we're working to market and promote. Let's update that tourism plan. Let's update our comprehensive plan. Let's have a comprehensive tourism and economic development plan that sells DuPont, that tells the story of the vacant land that we have, all of the strengths that the businesses talked about earlier, and all of the reasons that businesses move here, that businesses thrive here. Obviously, we all have tough times in this economy, but there's a reason businesses move to DuPont, and there's many more reasons for more businesses to move to DuPont, and we're not telling that story. And so the best return on investment that these folks said was, let's come together and let's tell that story about our city. Let's try to invest in economic development, and let's grow our economy. Let's tell that story. And by doing so, we will all benefit. And so looking at limited time and limited energy and resources, I think instead of reforming our B&O tax now, let's figure out what our needs are. Let's analyze the DNA of our businesses, our home businesses, the businesses that are located here, the brick and mortars, and the many people that are outside of our community that do business that don't live here, that don't reside here. Let's analyze the DNA of our businesses. Let's figure out where we want to go, who we want to attract, who we want to retain, and then look at opportunities to invest and incentivize those businesses. But without a plan going forward, we're just moving the pieces around, and it's not the most prudent thing to do right now from my perspective. The other thing that we talked about was the licensing fee. And I'll refer you back to the conversation about the strengths and the weaknesses. And one of the weaknesses was permitting. Well, we don't have any resources to increase our permitting capabilities here. We need the technical expertise of a senior planner to come in and help expedite some of our processes, to update our comprehensive plan, to put some of these economic development plans in place that we're talking about. We don't have the resources now. So one of the things we looked at was restructuring the business licensing fee so that smaller businesses would pay less and larger businesses would pay more, and we would use that additional revenue to address the needs that will ultimately strengthen economic development. And the goals would be to reduce permit time for new business development, create an economic development plan, build on and update the existing tourism plan, and really emphasize economic growth and development that identifies priority needs and actions to convey to the world that DuPont is open for business. So that's the direction that I recommend that we move in, that we quickly reform the DuPont business license fee. We do an analysis of of what the staffing expertise is to provide those services, to streamline permitting, figure out what that would cost, and we restructure the business license fee to invest in that need, come up with a plan, and then figure out how to invest in that plan. And one of those ways of investing in that plan could be the B&O tax. It's not off the table. But the bottom line is looking at where to put priorities and looking at what the needs are. That was a very significant need right now that we have that could provide huge opportunities to strengthen economic development and growth, which we badly need. Because if the citizens come together and they say, yes, we want to preserve public safety, we want to invest in the infrastructure that our public safety personnel rely upon, the fire station, the police station, the city hall, and they pass that property tax, that puts us in a different spot. And if they don't, that puts us in a whole different spot. Meanwhile, we need to be selling DuPont. We need to be encouraging businesses to come here. We need to provide the stability of our public safety, of our parks and recreation, of our services. We need to streamline permitting. We need to take care of long-standing issues like street trees and make sure that DuPont continues to be a beautiful and attractive place for many generations to come, and continue telling the story of our significant history and celebrating that. So council, we'll have some options and some analysis that we will do before your next council meeting. But we have 2 council workshops, both on the September 18th and September 25th, where we will continue talking about this. We will go in depth into our B&O tax structure. We'll go in depth into the licensing structure. We'll walk through all of the different options that I presented to the businesses and got their feedback on, so we can really get into the weeds. And I've told the business community, and obviously every meeting's open to the public, to come and provide their feedback, to come and provide their thoughts. I've asked these business groups to not just show up for these 2 meetings with the mayor and walk away, but to stay engaged with this process, help us grow and strengthen our economy. And I told them, I said, you know, it seems reasonable, it seems logical, it seems practical to have an economic development and tourism plan. It seems like a no-brainer, but we don't have one, and I don't have the resources or the time or the expertise to create one within City Hall. So we're going to need help. We're going to need more public-private partnerships with the Pierce County Regional Council, with the Puget Sound Regional Council, with the Economic Development Board, with all of the local assets that we have here, both in individual homeowners that have business experience and many of our business entrepreneurs that are invested here in the community to come together and help us develop this plan. And it's going to require our tourism board and our planning agency to work together. We don't need to operate in silos on this issue. We need to come together. And the Historical Society, which has a huge asset of economic development for us. Our history is something, as I said earlier, we need to preserve and we need to invest in. But all these groups need to come together and have one economic development and tourism plan to tell people that DuPont's open for business. And so we'll talk about this process going forward on the 18th and 25th council when you have your workshops. The next thing that I want to touch base on briefly is upcoming meetings. There's, as I mentioned earlier, on September 17th at 6 p.m. at City Hall, the city's town hall meeting. This will be the opportunity, as we talked about earlier, to understand the council's decisions, the council's deliberations, as they listen to the public, as they listen to the options of the finance committee, as they listen to my recommendations, and as they determined their path forward from their perspective. So this will be a great opportunity. I encourage everyone to come. There will also be the council workshops that I mentioned earlier, September 18th at 6 p.m. at City Hall, and the 25th will be a regular council meeting, and this will be one of those conversations where we, instead of in a workshop function, we just have the revenue reform discussions on the discussion item. The last thing is neighborhood meetings. When I was having this community finance committee come together, I was hanging out with a couple of folks and asking them what they thought about it, and they said, that's great. Like, it's awesome to actually get everyone together in the same room and help figure this out, be part of the solution, be more inclusive. You should do more of that. And Mike said to me, he goes, you should go out and do this to different neighborhoods. Well, there's a lot of different neighborhoods here, and I can't go to every one. But what I thought was important was let's create opportunities to continue coming together as a community and have informal conversations. We'll talk about the priorities, we'll talk about what's been done, and I'll do a lot of listening. I want to hear what's important to the issues in your neighborhood, in your family, and in our community. And there's a couple of dates that have been set. The Thursday, October 4th at 10 a.m. at the Community Center. Saturday, October 6th at 2 p.m. at the Home Course. And Monday, October 8th here at the Civic Center. I think we're going to meet in the Emergency Operations Center at the Public Safety Building. The reason for the 3 dates and the 3 locations and the different times is because when we had that town hall meeting, folks said, hey, this is great that you brought this finance committee together and all these citizens and business owners came together and they were open to the public, but the meetings were at night and we couldn't attend. So then we had a town hall meeting. I think it was like Saturday at 2. And they said, that's great that you had a meeting that was open to the public that we could all attend, but it's at 2 o'clock, it's Saturday. I can't make that. I've got soccer practice and band camp and other things. And they said, that's great that you have these public discussions at your city council meetings, but they're late in the evening and they're inconvenient to come. So what I said is, well, let's structure this in such a way that we're providing opportunities at different locations and different times so that more people have the opportunity to attend. Because if the goal is to come together and to be inclusive and talk about issues, that's why we're meeting at 10 a.m. on a Thursday. That's why we're meeting at 2 p.m. on a Saturday. And that's why we'll meet at 6 p.m. on a Monday. And I invite folks to come to these meetings and, as I said earlier, share the issues that are important to you, important to your family, and important to the community so we can come together and keep identifying problems, solutions, and opportunities to keep moving forward together. So that'll conclude my mayor's report, and I'll turn it over to the city administrator's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Just have 2 things this evening. One of them is just to remind everyone that the Hoffman Hill Division 5 Park is closed. There's temporary fencing up to try and keep people out of there so they can keep the site safe and keep our kids safe while they're trying to finish that project. So please stay out of there and encourage others to do the same. They're working on railing, landscaping, rockery. They've got some punch list items they're taking care of, and they're repairing some stuff. We're hoping that the park will be opened on Friday, September 28th. And then the second thing is some of you may have heard some different rumors on the street about ambulance transport and some changes that may or may not be happening. And so I'd like our Fire Chief, Greg Hull, to please give us a brief update on what the latest hot off the press is on that.
Thank you, Ms. Masco. Good evening, Mayor Graham. Good evening, Council. Just a short update on medic unit response issues in DuPont. You will remember that historically for the past 2 years, our ALS, Advanced Life Support, response times from privates has been averaging 19 to 21 minutes, and our BLS responses, Basic Life Support, has been averaging 24 to 26 minutes. The companies that provide us service are primarily AMR, American Medical Response, and RM, Rural Metro, backed up by Madigan Ambulance Service, and as a last resort, West Pierce Fire and Rescue. AMR has announced that they are going to be doing some staffing changes effective the middle of the month, and they will be staffing 4 less ALS cars in Pierce County, but increasing their BLS cars by 6. So your question is probably, well, what does that mean to citizens of DuPont? DuPont Fire has contacted Central Pierce Fire and Rescue, and that's the Puyallup, Parkland, Spanaway area, and West Pierce, of course, is Pierce County, or is University Place and Lakewood. Then we contacted JBLM because they also get limited support, and the town of Stillicum. And everybody has taken a wait-and-see attitude. Even Rural Metro said they're going to wait and see how it's impacted before they adjust their car strength. The second thing we have done is contacted Olympia Ambulance out of Thurston County. And Typically, Olympic will come to us about once a quarter, and they've agreed that they will come down here when units are available. Our dispatch center only dispatches Pierce County resources, so we have to call them on our own. And then finally, we have Medic 25, which can be an ALS or a BLS car. It's been both in the past. It is equipped but not staffed. And we've developed an emergency plan so that we could transfer our personnel from Engine 25 to Aid 25 and transport BLS calls with that unit. We have done one transport in the last 30 days. And that is kind of where we sit now, is in a wait-and-see mode. And if you have questions, I'll answer them.
Any questions from council? Councilmember Coffey?
Yes. When the DuPont aid car transports someone, what is the impact on the city?
The city is left without an engine company in town and dependent on mutual aid.
And then what kind of a response time would that be?
JBLM is normally 8 to 9 minutes, and West Pierce is 12.
Thank you.
Additional questions from council? Councilmember Quartz?
Chief, and I know you're just kind of reporting it, so you're the bearer of bad news, not the generator of bad news. But do we have any idea how many transport requirements a month that we typically experience versus how many fire engine requirements a month we generate?
Our response load is 80% EMS and 20% everything else. Not necessarily fires. We do a lot of other activities, but the majority of our calls are medical aid in nature.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Additional questions? Councilmember Coffey.
A follow-up to Councilmember Quartz. Isn't that typical, that type of a percentage split, pretty close for most fire departments?
Yes, it is. They actually run a little higher, typically around 85%, but ours is 80.
Any additional questions? Anything else for your report? No? This will bring us to council reports. Any reports from council? Next on the agenda is department reports. Are there any questions from council on the department reports that are included in your packet and on the website? No unfinished business. There's no new business. This brings us to the last public comment opportunity for the evening. Is there anyone that would like to come and address the council on any issue important to you or your community that was discussed tonight or in the future? Ray, come on up.
Ray Cowan, 1852 Johnson Avenue, DuPont. Just while I was listening, Forza, that cafe there, and the park, Ross Park, seem to be the central part of DuPont where visitors, if they're coming off the motorway, they tend to end up in that area. So what about a master information plaque pointing to what's available? The creek, the Dynamite Park, running track, the golf course. So somebody can soak up that information, and perhaps they might be on bicycles and say, okay, that's a place to visit next time we come here. That's it.
That's a good idea. I know that was something that was kicked around at many of the conversations. As I said, the sign code's been needing to be updated for years, and that was one of the interests that the business community had. I don't know what the feedback or the public interest would be, or where we'd get the money for something like that. But I will tell you, one of the things that we're doing that's good news that's related to that is the signs that are all over our community that say Northwest Landing, and those are now owned by the city. Thanks to conversations with the previous owners of that, they were just going to take them down and pull them out. And we said, no, we want them. We'll put them to use. And so all those signs, you will see them changing. And Ms. Masco is going to give me a plan and a strategy going forward for how we're going to address this. But there's a huge opportunity for the public to, again, come and help out with this. I've talked to the Boy Scouts and the Cub Scouts, and they said, yeah, we'll we'll go in and help remove some of those placards, and we'll help paint some of those signs that are there. It'll be a great public service project for our Cub Scouts and our Boy Scouts, and maybe there's even some high school students that want to come in and help out that have a culminating exhibit project. But the bottom line is all those signs we now own, and we're going to use them to communicate information about the city throughout the city. And so we'll be working on that, and we'll be putting up there, instead of the Northwest Landing website and the Northwest Landing logo, we'll be putting up the City of DuPont name, and we'll be putting up the City of DuPont's URL address. So we need help to do this, and Ms. Masco will make sure that the plan and the next steps is shared with the public as that goes forward. But Ray, that's going to be, I think, our nearest best opportunity to help provide information about what are the assets that our community has, where are our historical points of interest, where are our businesses, where can people access different points throughout the city. We'd love your help on making that possible. And if any insights or suggestions you have for that larger sign, I'd really encourage you to talk to the planning agency about it, and Bill Kingman and some of the other business owners. And you're pointing to your wife. I know. See, that's the thing. This is what's so much fun is Ray's wife is on the planning agency. So I don't know who he was really coming up to lobby at the microphone. Me, the council, the planning agency, or his wife here who's in the audience and serving on the planning agency. So either way, Ray, very, very thorough coverage in your lobbying efforts. But I think it's a good idea, and I think we should look at it. But meanwhile, let's focus on revamping those Wayfarer signs and put our city's logo and our website and our historical locations on there, and maybe even create some opportunities for businesses to pay and advertise on there and help generate some revenue for maintaining those signs into the future. That was something I talked to one of the business owners about, and be a good revenue generating opportunity, so at least maintenance is covered in the future. So yeah, thanks for the idea, and we'll look into the other one. Any additional public comments, ideas? Kara Mitchell.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and staff. I have a couple questions. You alluded to the tree pilot project in Palisade Village. Where can residents find out more information about that?
Pete?
Specifically, the pilot program that the tree board will be doing, is that the question?
Yeah, what Mayor Graham mentioned tonight in his report.
The additional details will be coming forward. Right now, the tree board is working on what that will look like, starting with neighborhood meetings in and around the, I believe, Thompson to Haskell area. Correct me if I'm wrong, John, you're right. So that I believe that was the intent of the question, yes.
Okay. So that's still under development, basically?
That's correct.
Okay. And then a follow-up question regarding DuPont Medic 25, and this might be directed to Chief Hull. Somebody asked about the impact on the city. Is there a financial cost on this that's involved with this if suddenly we're using the ambulance again that we haven't been using for a long time? Can you clarify if there's a financial hit the city's going to take on this or not?
Certainly. Currently, there's not a financial impact. There's a time impact getting medic units into the city and then to a hospital, and we've been fighting that issue for a couple of years. We've had a number of instances this summer, spring and summer, where no transport vehicles were available for an hour to 2 hours. And in some cases, we've had to ask family members to drive a loved one, a BLS patient, a loved one to the hospital themselves.
And BLS is basic life support.
Basic life support. And that's a big concern for us. We view Aid 25 as last out.
Okay. Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional public questions, comments? Please state your name and address for the record.
Marjorie Sebesta, 502 DuPont in Old DuPont. How many transports do you do a month?
I hazard to say, I'm going to guess 30 to 35. If you give me your name, I can get you the exact number for any month over the last year or two.
Okay. Because when you were located a block away from me, it didn't seem like you went out that often in Old DuPont. So,
Oh, certainly. Our response numbers over the last several years have been going up. Right now, we're on pace to run 800 calls this year. When we left the historic village, I'm going to guess, I'm thinking our call volume was just a little under 400.
okay. And how many of those are transported? If you have 800 calls, because I've seen calls where there was no transport. There was a...
Lots of calls have no transports. I believe we transport in the neighborhood of 250 a year.
Okay. And could you tell me where you transport it?
It can be Tacoma General to St. Clair to Madigan and into Thurston County. There's 5 or 6 hospitals that we transport to.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Councilmember Ehrenreich.
When you say you transport, what you really mean is you're having these other agencies come in and do the transporting.
Thank you for the correction.
Yeah.
I tend to say we on almost everything because we
the only
respond.
transports that you've done is one in the last month.
We've done a single transport to St. Clair Hospital this year.
We is the private service that we contract to, which is not really we
That is
or us.
correct.
Yeah, it's
that
them.
was incorrect.
Yeah. We who wears a badge, to us it's a them. Any other public comments or questions? Shauna.
Shauna Gassick, 2228 Anderson Avenue. I wanted to address the business tax reform. When I was on the Community Finance Committee, we believed that the payment for the Civic Center should be a shared resolution between the people that live here, the residents of DuPont, and the business owners. And when you say that we both pay property taxes, I don't believe that to be accurate, because the 538 businesses outside of DuPont that do business in DuPont do not pay property taxes. There are 84 home occupation businesses, most of whom probably do pay property taxes, the 4 warehouses, which I'm sure do, and then 152 businesses within city limits. Most of those are rented. They don't necessarily own the property in which they do business. So I don't think it's a fair statement to say that the businesses pay property taxes when in fact a majority of them do not. Part of living in DuPont with the easy access, the strengths that you're talking about, the proximity to JBLM, the beauty of DuPont, the safe city, the trails, the lower taxes, that's all great, but we have to pay for those things as citizens, and the businesses should have to pay for it as well. I was at the 2 meetings that you had with the business owners, and I was very disappointed to see the turnout that came here. And I'm very surprised that you're listening to what some of those owners were saying, because some of them didn't actually own businesses here. And the 2 people who I thought spoke the loudest didn't even know about our Civic Center debt. They had no idea. And those were the CEOs of the 2 credit unions in town. Okay? And they spoke the loudest, and so I'm just really disappointed that we're listening to these people who didn't even know about the debt that we have. And I think that you need to talk about it further. I don't think that you should dismiss the idea of a business tax reform right now. I don't think that you'll have very good luck passing the levy if you don't do the business tax reform, because when we had the town hall meeting, all of the citizens were in agreement that something had to be done and it should be shared. And the fact that you're dismissing it so quickly is really upsetting.
I appreciate your feedback. And just to clarify, I mean, Shauna's right. I mean, and Sandy, you can correct me if I'm wrong in here. I don't know if Forza actually pays property tax. I doubt they write a check. But the businesses are paid. They pay their rent, and there's another business that actually owns the property, and the commercial property owner is a business, and that business pays the property tax. And so, I mean, I'm not going to go through and line by line say which businesses pay and which businesses don't, but the bottom line is there's a variety of businesses, and they pay property tax, and we have residents, and they pay property tax, which makes it a equitable solution from my perspective. But you are right. I mean, like Forza and Forelli's and some of those others that lease, they don't pay a direct property tax. And then there's the businesses that do live outside and they do work inside the city. They don't pay property tax. But the way to get them could be through the B&O property tax, as well as through the licensing, which is an opportunity that we're going to explore. And just to be clear, I'm not dismissing anything. What I heard from our businesses is there's a need to develop a plan and come together and figure out how do we promote and how do we sell our city. We can adjust property tax, we can adjust B&O, we can adjust business licensing fees, but if we're really serious about figuring out how to grow our economy and how to grow our way out of our problem, we need to have a careful and credible plan that tells us where to invest and what those priorities are. And then we need to revisit what those resources may be. So by no means am I dismissing anything, but I'd be silly not to listen to the businesses, because they do locate here, they do business here, they do provide benefits here, they do pay property taxes here, some of them. And some of them, you're right, were surprisingly, I'm not going to name names as Shauna did, but there were some in the community that were at those meetings that were not up to speed on some of the issues, and there's some that were. But the bottom line is the B&O tax reform is still an option that's on the table. But what I said earlier is where we need to invest, from my perspective, time and energy, is coming up with a plan of where do we need to invest, where do we need to get the greatest return, and what are the tools within that system to attract and to retain those businesses. And the second need that the businesses identified, second to the sign code, was let's try to streamline permitting. So licensing fees is a low-hanging fruit to try to get some resources in here to streamline our processes and attract more businesses. Well, we come up with a plan to do more of that, leaving resources and revenue on the table. The decision of how to fill the gap of the $770,000 for making the payments on the Civic Center, which we have to make, which we will make, that decision has been made. And the decision has been made by the council, and now the citizens will make that decision. And really, they're the true decision makers. They're the ones that elect the council, they're the ones that elect me, and they're the ones that will make that decision in November, and we'll figure out how to keep going forward. But meanwhile, I think it's prudent to leave that resource of revenue and investing in a plan on the table as we come up with a plan to figure out where we want to go, what to invest, who we want to attract and incentivize and keep, and then how we're going to pay for the implementation of that plan. So I appreciate your feedback, and you know, it will be an ongoing conversation that's not dismissed. So any other public comments or questions?
Lee Chase, 309 Barksdale. Very nice words tonight that have been stated from the dais up here. I'd like to string two thoughts together. Recently, just a few minutes ago, I heard that we have a contract with ALS and BLS units, and earlier tonight I heard about performance audits. I guess twofold. One is that I have some concern that if indeed we do have these contracts, why they're not performance-based, and that should eliminate the problem of the 19 minutes, because the county has some rules about time limits. Second of all, if we have a contract, we shouldn't have a problem about ambulances not showing up. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Lee. Chief, is there any insights that you can provide to that or clarification?
Lee, did I say we have a contract? We do not have a contract for, okay.
Oh, that's the point he was making.
Okay. We're dependent on the private ambulances without contract, and that's what makes the times, you know, we paid for a service. They build their capacity on what they know they're going to get, and so when we leave it open, we get what's available. And that's why there's a charge. That's why we, at one point, contracted with Lakewood when they existed. But currently, we do not have any contracts.
Okay. Thank you. And if you're pointing out that I misspoke, I apologize for whatever that was. I didn't get it in your initial comment, but I got it now. So thanks. Any other public comments? Okay, with that, there's no executive session. We'll adjourn the meeting tonight at 9:02. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for